themselves as to which of them would do such a deed.
Another dispute arose among them about who would be regarded as the greatest. But Jesus said to them,
"Earthly rulers domineer over their people. Those who exercise authority over them are called their benefactors. This must not happen with you. Let the greatest among you be like the youngest. Let the leader among you become the follower. For who is the greater, the one who reclines at a meal or the one who serves it? Isn't it the one reclining at table? Yet here I am among you as the one who serves you. You are the ones who have stood faithfully by me in trials. Just as God has given me dominion, so I give it to you. In my reign, you will eat and drink at my table, and you'll sit on thrones judging the 12 tribes of Israel. Simon, Simon, Satan has demanded that you be sifted like wheat, but I've prayed for you, that your faith may not fail. You, in turn, must give strength to your sisters and brothers."
Peter answered,
"Rabbi, with you I'm prepared to face imprisonment and even death."
Jesus said to them,
"When I sent you off without purse, traveling bag, or sandals, were you in need of anything?"
No, nothing, they replied.
Jesus said,
"Now, however, the one who has a purse had better carry it. The same with a traveling bag. And if they don't have a sword, they should sell their cloaks and buy one. For I tell you, what was written in Scripture must be fulfilled in me. The suffering servant was counted among criminals. But whatever refers to me must be fulfilled."
And they said, Look,
Rabbi, here are 2 swords.
Jesus answered,
That is enough.
Then Jesus went out and made his way as usual to the Mount of Olives. The disciples accompanied him.
When they reached the place, Jesus said to them,
"Pray that you not be put to the test."
Then Jesus withdrew about a stone's throw from them, knelt down, and prayed.
"Abba, if it's your will, take this cup from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done."
When Jesus rose from prayer, he came to the disciples and found them sleeping, exhausted with grief. He said to them,
Why do you sleep? Wake up and pray that you not be subjected to the trial.
While Jesus was still speaking, a crowd suddenly appeared with Judas, one of the 12, at their head. Judas came over to Jesus to embrace him, but Jesus said,
"Judas, are you betraying the chosen one with a kiss?"
Those who were around Jesus, realizing what was going to happen, said, Rabbi,
should we strike them with our swords?
One of them struck the attendant of the high priest, cutting off an ear. Jesus said,
"Stop! No more of this!" Then Jesus touched the attendant's ear and healed it.
But to those who had come out against him, the chief priests, the chiefs of the temple guard, and the elders, Jesus said,
"Why do you come out with swords and clubs as if I were a robber?
I was with you in the temple every day, and you could have laid hands on me any time you wanted. But this is your hour, the triumph of darkness.
They arrested Jesus and led him away, arriving at the house of the high priest. Peter followed at a distance and sat down in the midst of those who had kindled a fire in the courtyard and were sitting around it. One of the high priest's attendants saw him sitting there at the fire, and she stared at him and said,
"This one was with Jesus too."
But Peter denied it and said,
I don't know him.
A little later, someone else noticed Peter and remarked,
"You're one of them too."
but Peter said,
No, I'm not.
about an hour later, someone else insisted.
"Surely this fellow was with them too. He even talks like a Galilean."
I don't even know what you're talking about.
Peter said, just then, as Peter was still speaking, a rooster crowed. Jesus turned and looked at Peter. Then Peter remembered Jesus saying, "Before a rooster crows today, you'll deny me 3 times." Peter went out and wept bitterly.
Meanwhile, those who held Jesus in custody were amusing themselves at his expense. They blindfolded and slapped him, and then taunted him.
Play the prophet. Which one struck you? And they hurled many other insults at him. At daybreak, the Sanhedrin, which was made up of the elders of the people, the chief priests, and the religious scholars, assembled again. Once they had brought Jesus before the council, they said, "Tell us, are you the Messiah?"
Jesus replied,
If I tell you, you'll not believe me. And if I question you, you won't answer. But from now on, the chosen one will have a seat at the right hand of the power of God.
Then all of them said, "So you are God's own?"
Jesus answered,
Your own words have said it.
They said, "What need do we have of witnesses? We have heard it from his own mouth."
Then the whole assembly arose and led Jesus to Pilate. They began to accuse Jesus by saying,
We found this one subverting our nation, opposing the payment of taxes to Caesar, and even claiming to be the Messiah, a king.
Then Pilate questioned Jesus.
"Are you the king of the Jews?"
Jesus answered,
You have said it.
Then Pilate reported to the chief priests and the crowds,
"I find no guilt in him.
But they insisted.
He stirs up the people wherever he teaches, through the whole of Judea, from Galilee to Jerusalem." On hearing this, Pilate asked whether Jesus was a Galilean, and learning that Jesus was from Herod's jurisdiction, sent Jesus off to Herod, who was also in Jerusalem at this time.
Now at the sight of Jesus, Herod was very pleased. From the reports he had heard about Jesus, he had wanted for a long time to see him. Herod hoped to see Jesus perform some miracle.
Herod questioned him at great length, but Jesus wouldn't answer. The chief priests and the religious scholars stood there, accusing Jesus vehemently. So Herod and the soldiers treated Jesus with contempt and ridicule, put a magnificent robe upon him, and sent him back to Pilate. Herod and Pilate, who had previously been set against each other, became friends that day.
Pilate then called together the chief priests, the ruling class, and the people, and said to them,
"You have brought this person before me as someone who incites people to rebellion. I have examined him in your presence and have found no basis for any charge against him arising from your allegations. Neither has Herod, for Jesus has been sent back to us. Obviously, he has done nothing to deserve death. Therefore, I will punish Jesus, but then I will release him."
Pilate was obligated to release one prisoner to the people at festival time. The whole crowd cried out as one,
"Take him away! We want Barabbas!" Barabbas had been imprisoned for starting a riot in the city and for murder. Pilate wanted to release Jesus, so he addressed them again. But they shouted back, "Crucify him! Crucify him!"
Yet a third time Pilate spoke to the crowd.
What wrong has this Jesus done? I've found nothing that calls for death. Therefore, I'll have him flogged, and then I'll release him."
But they demanded that Jesus be crucified, and their shouts increased in volume. Pilate decided that their demands should be met. So he released Barabbas, the one who had been imprisoned for rioting and murder, and Jesus was handed over to the crowd.
As they led Jesus away, they seized Simon, a Cyrene, who was just coming in from the fields, and forced him to carry the cross behind Jesus. A large crowd was following, many of them women who were beating their breasts and wailing for him. At one point, Jesus turned to these women and said,
"Daughters of Jerusalem, don't weep for me. Weep rather for yourselves and for your children. The time is coming when it will be said, 'Blessed are the childless, the wombs that have never given birth, and the breasts that have never nursed.' Then people will say to the mountains, 'Fall on us!' and to the hills, 'Cover us up!' For if they do these things when the wood is green, what will happen when it is dry?"
Two others were also led off with Jesus, criminals who were to be put to death. When they had reached the place called the Skull, they crucified Jesus there, together with the criminals, one on his right and one on his left. And Jesus said,
"Abba, forgive them. They don't know what they are doing."
Then they divided his garments, rolling dice for them. The people stood there watching. The rulers, however, jeered him and said,
"He saved others. Let him save himself, if he really is the Messiah of God, the chosen one." The soldiers also mocked him. They served Jesus sour wine and said,
"If you are really King of the Jews, save yourself."
There was an inscription above Jesus that read, "This is the King of the Jews." One of the criminals who hung there beside him insulted Jesus too, saying,
"Are you really the Messiah? Then save yourself and us."
But the other one answered the first with a rebuke.
"Don't you even fear God? We are only paying the price for what we have done, but this one has done nothing wrong."
Then he said,
"Jesus, remember me when you come into your glory."
Jesus replied,
"The truth is, today you'll be with me in paradise."
It was about noon, and darkness fell on the whole land until 3 in the afternoon because of an eclipse of the sun. Then the curtain in the sanctuary was torn in two, and Jesus uttered a loud cry and said,
"Abba, into your hands I commit my spirit."
Saying this, Jesus breathed for the last time.
God, saying,
"Surely this one was innocent."
When the crowds that had gathered for the spectacle saw what had happened, they returned home beating their breasts and weeping. All the acquaintances of Jesus and the women who had come with him from Galilee stood at a distance, looking on.
There was a member of the Sanhedrin named Joseph who had not consented to their action. Joseph was from Arimathea and lived in anticipation of the reign of God. He approached Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Joseph took the body down, wrapped it in fine linen, and laid it in a tomb cut out of rock where no one had yet been laid. It was preparation day, and the Sabbath was about to begin.
The women who accompanied Jesus from Galilee followed Joseph, saw the tomb, and watched as the body was placed in it. Then they went home to prepare the spices and ointments, but they rested on the Sabbath, according to the law.
Before we leave this morning from our Palm Passion experience, our children will lead us. A child does lead us. I often remember as we approach Holy Week how joyous it is to lead you in worship on Christmas Eve. There are wonderful hymns, excitement, thinking of going with friends and family back home, to share in the gift giving, to have time to share a feast. I remember how vividly we enjoyed the beauty of the evening worship and holding a small candle lit with flame as it extends and lights the entire room in the beauty of this sanctuary. Centuries have passed, and yet the story remains, and we would not celebrate the birthday of Jesus without remembering his entire life, from beginning to end on this planet Earth and beyond on Easter Sunday. This is the time of the year for us to wait on the edge of our seats, to be on the crack of creation, to know that there is a thin gossamer veil between life and death for all of us. We celebrate even on Palm Sunday. We are Easter people, are we not? We know the story of Jesus, the beauty of new birth, the cry of a baby. And we also know the blessing and the sacredness of a vigil with a loved one. who crosses over into new territory. Today, indeed, we remember Palm Sunday. We see the children handing out palms, and we remember that the reason we hand out palms is so that as disciples of Jesus, we can prepare to burn them and use them on Ash Wednesday. My friends, the story continues because we are the living gospel. The gospel of Jesus Christ lives in us as we tell our story and as we live our lives from birth to death, with drama, with courage, with comfort, and especially embracing the great love of a great and good God with ancient love, embraces God's people around this world and says, leave the past behind. I will make all things new. My friends, let us be Easter people. I'd invite the choir to sing our anthem and for the children to distribute our palms.